नमस्कार दोस्तों और जय हिंद। आप सभी को स्वागत है इन माय चैनल 1971 वॉर बुक सीरीज। दोस्तों, हम नॉर्मली 1971 जंग के बारे में जब बात करते हैं तो वी फोकस मोस्टली ऑन द बांग्लादेश साइड, लेकिन वेस्टर्न फ्रंट के बारे में भी बात करना जरूरी है। और उससे भी जरूरी है कि आप शायद भूल चुके होंगे या शायद आपको यह पता नहीं होगा कि पाकिस्तान ने 1971 के जंग में हमारे कुछ प्रिजनर्स ऑफ वॉर, जिनको पाकिस्तानी फौज ने 1971 में बंधक बना लिया था जंग में, ऐसे कुछ ऑफिसर्स और सिपाही ऑल फ्रॉम द ट्राई सर्विसेज ऑफ द इंडियन आर्म्ड फोर्सेस से कैप्चर किए थे। लेकिन इवन आफ्टर रिपैट्रिएटिंग अ लॉट ऑफ दीज पीपल बैक, फिर भी उन्होंने बहुत सारे ऐसे शानदार ऑफिसर्स और जवानों को वापस नहीं किया था। साल बीतते गए, ये सब प्रिजनर्स ऑफ वॉर के फैमिलीज को भी पता चल चुका था कि पाकिस्तानी जेलों में उनके लव्ड वंस अभी भी मौजूद है, अभी भी उनको बंधक बना के रखे हैं। इवन a news came up कि भारतीय prisoner of war from 15 Punjab regiment was languishing in a jail in Oman 41 years later after the 1971 war। आप सोच सकते हैं इतना भयंकर उल्लंघन ऑफ द जेनीवा कन्वेंशंस को किया था पाकिस्तान ने और पाकिस्तानी आर्म्ड फोर्सेस ने, लेकिन इसका आज तक कोई जस्टिस नहीं मिला। 53 years later after 1971 war, many families are still wishing for any news of their loved ones who might still be languishing in Pakistan। आज हम एक ऐसे ऑफिसर के बारे में बात करने वाले हैं जिनका नाम है कैप्टन कमाल बख्शी फ्रॉम द 5 सिख रेजिमेंट, जिन्होंने बैटल ऑफ छम्ब ऑन द वेस्टर्न फ्रंट में हिस्सा लिया था। Unfortunately, he is also one of the men who has been declared as missing in action, और उनका नाम अभी भी लिस्ट में है as the former second in command of Alpha Company of the 5 Sikh Regiment, who was fighting to defend point 303 from the advancing Pakistani forces at Chhamb। तो आज हम उनके बारे में रिसर्च करने वाले उनके खुद के नेफ्यू मिस्टर शिवालिक बख्शी के साथ बात करेंगे about the life of Captain Kamal Bakshi and the situations for his own family that unfolded after he was declared as missing in action। Let's welcome Mr. Shivalik Bakshi to our program today।
Actually,
Nice.
my wish is to discuss with you regarding your uncle, Captain Kamal Bakshi,
Yeah,
and the entire incident regarding him being declared as missing in action, including some of his own actions with the 5 Sikh Regiment in the Battle of Chhamb. So we will be
Okay.
going on with that. So I would like you to start with a small introduction of yourself and how you are related to him and how you got interested in finding out the entire fiasco regarding the missing in action list, including what I can say the tragic and unfortunate incident regarding your uncle.
sure.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for setting this up, and I'd love to get some more exposure for Kamal's story. I am Shivalik Bakshi, of course. I am Kamal's nephew. He was my mother's older brother. Well, just a little bit about me. I live in the US now. I moved here about it's been about 25 years. So this was I finished my schooling in India, did my university in Canada, then I've been here ever since. And I'm a mechanical engineer,
Okay.
and my professional work has nothing to do with writing at all. So yeah, here I am discussing my book. As for how the book came about, writing a book wasn't my original intention. You know, when I started out, I just wanted to learn more about my uncle. I would ask my family for bits of information, and whatever little bits I could get from them. But my grandparents didn't want to talk too much. It was too painful, this
Right.
whole incident. So I would, I got a little bit from them, or from my mother, or from my aunt. And then some years ago, uh, it was my uncle's boarding school's 50-year reunion. He went to Sherwood College in Nainital, and it was during the reunion that some of his friends reached out to my aunt, asking about, hey, what news of Kamal? And they wanted, some of them didn't even know about what had happened. So they were trying to collect people for the reunion in Nainital, and that's when some of them found out about what had happened. So they reached out, and so that, my aunt put me in touch with them, and I just wanted to ask them, tell me more about him. I just want to learn more about him. And I was just expecting, a little. I wrote to them. I said, "Can you just tell me a few lines, just a little bit about him? I just want to get more idea about him." And some of them sent me pages and pages of information. There was so much they had to share, and so many stories, and that was such an eye opener for me, because all this time it was just this uncle of mine who disappeared before I was born,
Right.
and and now it's like this little sketch, an outline of a person, and they are filling in all the color, and suddenly this portrait of a real human being is coming to life. And that was just so amazing for me. And the more I learned, the more I realized, there was a real person here with a real story. And then I reached from that. I just wanted to learn more. So then I reached out to his army course mates and other people, whoever I could find who knew him. And this picture of him just kept getting more vivid for me. And then I realized he was quite an extraordinary man. It wasn't just another person. And then I reached a point, I'd collected so much information, I just felt compelled that I had to share the story with other people. It was just, and that's how the book came about. Yeah.
Right. And with your journey of writing the book, you must have come across a lot of information on your uncle. Could you share a bit about that, sir?
Yeah, for sure. So, of course, like I said, it all started off by first talking to a lot of people and collecting bits from everybody about him and the type of person he was. And it's interesting when you talk to one person, you ask them to describe a person, they describe something, and you talk to somebody else, they describe something else. And then when you put it all together, you can really see, all the sides to a person. So that was the beginning for it. And then I was very fortunate because I went and looked at my grandparents. They've passed on, but in their storeroom of their house, I found this trunk with all these letters that my uncle wrote ever since age is 7. When he joined boarding school, he was 7 years old, and they had every letter he wrote from age 7 to 17. And it was still there in the steel trunk.
I think he was he used to love playing the flute a lot.
Oh, the bagpipes.
Yeah, bagpipes, right.
Yeah, he was a bagpiper. Yeah. So I had all his letters, and there was a treasure trove of information to have, written over 70 years ago. But I had all these letters. Also in this trunk, I found his diaries, and when his diaries from school and his diary from NDA that he would keep when he was a cadet in NDA, and then start off with that, and then just learned more about the war from the army officers who were in his unit. He was in the Sikh Regiment in 5 Sikh. So learned more about from his army mates. And then there were a lot of books written about that war, fortunately. not just by Indians, but even by Pakistani officers.
Okay.
So I got a good view of the war from both sides, not just from the Indian side, but even from the Pakistani side. In fact, I even got in touch with the Pakistani officers who fought against him.
In that
And
same place.
in that very day, those 3 days, the tank commanders who were
Right, right.
attacking his post, I got in touch with them,
Okay.
and they were fantastic. These officers, they were so kind to me. These Pakistani officers, and they shared so many details from me that really, I had so many questions about the war. I got some information from the Indian side, but army officers, they are a little reluctant to discuss too much about what happens. Sure enough, you're right.
Yeah.
War's not pretty. War's pretty ugly. So then the Pakistani officers, they helped fill in these questions I had. Um, uh, so I got information from them, and so all this information, when I put it all together, I realized that I reached a point where I thought I had enough material so I could tell his story, not just starting from his childhood and all the way up to leading up to the war and what happened afterwards. Yeah.
I think your uncle's company was like attacked by an overwhelming Pakistani strength. First of all, company commander was killed, a lot of men were killed, and I think Havildar Ajit was the last person to see your uncle, right?
That's right. So that was Alpha Company. A Company was positioned at point 303 in the Chhamb sector,
Right.
and leading up to there was this causeway, this main roadway leading up from the Pakistani side into Chhamb, and point 303 was right dead center, to block off that main access into Chhamb. And of course, as you might have heard, I know about the Battle of Chhamb. Chhamb turned out to be Pakistan's biggest offensive of the 1971 war.
Right.
The aim was, you go through Chhamb and go all the way to Akhnur, and that's where the main bridge was that connected Kashmir to India back then. It was over that river at Akhnur. So that was Pakistan's aim, and the biggest offensive was launched there. And right in the middle was point 303, where Alpha Company was. My uncle was second in command in the beginning. It was Major Pannu was his commanding officer, and on the third day of the war, in an artillery barrage, Major Pannu was
Killed in action. Yeah.
he was killed in action. And then, so my uncle became the acting commander of point 303, and then he had his battles as commander. And then on December 6th morning, it was the biggest attack they've faced so far. They were attacked by a whole battalion, backed by a full squadron of tanks, and a squadron can be, more than 18 tanks. So it was a squadron of tanks, a whole battalion of from Pakistan. And by then, after losing so many men, Alpha Company was down to 2 platoons. They'd already lost. They'd lost a platoon in a village called Moil, which was further ahead. And that platoon has its own story to tell. They were, amazing. They managed to block the whole, pretty much the whole brigade, single-handedly for over 24 hours. And so one platoon was lost in Moil, another platoon worth of men were, they died during lead up to the last day of the war. So Alpha Company is down to 2 platoons, which is, whatever, 60 odd men, and they're being attacked. Yeah. And then a battalion, which is 500 people, and a squadron of tanks, which is more than 15 to 18 tanks. So that was their last stand at point 303. Yeah.
So I think five Sikh was repelled after a lot of heavy fighting, and
Yeah,
when they came back, I guess after a lot of fighting, Point 303 was recaptured.
that's right.
Right.
So this on the morning of December 6th, early in the morning, that's when the big attack started. And by late morning, they had overrun point 303. My uncle was declared killed, and the so the Pakistani tanks had come up to the right up to the point 303, and that's when a counterattack was organized by the Indian side. So five Sikh, I believe it was a company of Gurkhas, which was in reserve. So uh, they were
They were
uh,
sent in, I guess, with armor support.
they were sent in with it was some tanks, some Indian Army tanks supported them, and they counterattacked because it was a very critical situation for the Indians because after point 303, the roadway to the brigade headquarters was wide open to the Pakistani side, so they had to block that off. So the Indians counterattacked, and it was this Subedar, I think it was Narayan Singh, if I'm getting the name right. He was from 5C, so since he knew the area well, he was leading this counterattack with from the Indian side. And by late morning, early afternoon, the Indians managed to recapture point 303 and push the Pakistanis back below the ridge. So Chhamb was on the western side of the river, Munawar, and they were on the west of, and then so after the counterattack, the Indians recaptured point 303, and then Narayan Singh went looking for my uncle, and he went to the command post where Kamal Bakshi should have been, and there was no sign of him. And then he looked within 100 yards of the post, and there were many dead Indians and from both sides, and he found a lot of bodies, but he did not find my uncle, nor did he find my uncle's radio operator, who was with my uncle till the very end, because the radio operator stays with the officer. No, he's the radio operator. Like,
And he was
so even
alive,
he,
or was he dead?
they weren't found. They just don't. The two of them were not found. They were all the other Indians, the wounded and the dead were there. They found them, but they did not find. So right away, the battalion suspected. Obviously, this is an
So I have a
officer.
question. Like,
Yeah.
after these guys went in and finally recaptured the place, the bodies
Yeah.
that they might have found were in really terrible condition. They try to identify the people.
I don't know much about that. I can only imagine, and a lot of bad things happen in a war.
Yeah.
You get explosions in front of you. You can get run over by armor. So yeah, for sure. I mean, it couldn't have been pretty. But yeah, for sure. So that's the extent of what I know about that. But yeah, go ahead.
So another thing, that his body was never found, so there was no, I mean, what I can say, no case of telling that this person is killed in action or captured by the Pakistanis. But later it started coming out that maybe he had been captured and not released, because after the Shimla agreement, the prisoners of war were slowly being released.
Right. So yeah, so people go missing in war all the time, and that's you can get blown off, and there's nothing to recognize. So just because he was missing, it didn't really mean he was still alive. But you just suspect it. If the officer's missing, the radio operator's missing, everybody else is there, their bodies are there, then there is a suspicion. But that was that. Uh, so then what happened was 3 weeks after the war ended, so the war ended December 16th, I believe, on January 9th, that's almost 3 weeks after, the two sides, India and Pakistan, they exchanged the list of POWs they were both holding. So the Red Cross was pressuring both the countries, and that's a very smart thing to do. You know, you want that right away. You want the list of POWs, because the longer it takes, the more chance of people not being accounted for.
Yeah.
So the Red Cross officials were there, flying between Delhi and Islamabad, and by January 9th, these lists were exchanged. The Indians gave the list first. I don't know why, but anyway, that's how it worked. The Indians gave the list to an official who took it to Geneva, and then a day later, the Pakistani side gave their list. So by January 9th, both sides knew who was being held on the other side, and he was not on the list. Like, my uncle wasn't on the list, and that's when the telegrams were started being sent out to families to let them know. The similar agreement happened about 6 months after that, in the summer of '72, and then
by December of '72, I think most of the prisoners were back by through the Wagah border, I guess.
Only the prisoners who fought on the Western Front were released. They exchanged by December '72. The prisoners from the Bangladeshi war were released in '74. Right. So they were in the Indians held. They were held on until '74. So if my uncle was to be released, he should, by December '72. It was December 1st, I believe, at Wagah border. He should have been in that exchange, and that's because there were no Indian prisoners from the Bangladeshi side, right? On the Bangladeshi side, there were only Pakistani. But so all the Indian POWs were on the other side, on the Western side, and that's when the two sides exchanged them. In fact, my grandfather was there at Wagah border that time. Although he'd already been told that my uncle isn't there, but my grandfather was still there, standing by the side where the gates opened. There were two queues, one going this way, the other going the other way, and he was just trying to ask people coming in if they had any news. Of course, they did not, and that was the last. So yeah, that's how it went.
Okay, and this search for POWs that started, I guess, people who were suspected to be still in Pakistan. I think the MDPRA started it, right? Missing.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. So the family. So the way that happened was, so in the case of my family, we sort of thought, okay, he's missing. The army says declared killed, and we were like, okay, so maybe he's declared killed. Maybe that's what happened. He died. And then there were some families that started suspecting some fishy business right from the beginning. For example, on the second or third day of the war, there was this flight lieutenant, Vijay Tambe. He was shot down over West Pakistan, and a newspaper in Pakistan wrote his name on the newspaper. This is 2 days after the war starts that Tambe has been captured. One of the Indian planes was shot, and one of the captured was Tambe. And then when this POW list was exchanged, Flight Lieutenant Tambe wasn't on it, and his family is like, wait a minute, that's what's going on. So that was one point, and then and there were other families, but that was probably who suspected. There was a Time magazine that was published 10 days after the war ended.
Okay.
and 10 days after in America. So this Time magazine is published in America, and there's an article on it about the war that had just gotten over, and in that there's a photograph of a Indian prisoner, behind bars. In fact, there's another Indian prisoner behind him. You can't see his face as well. The
Yeah,
other
yeah,
one,
yeah. I remember that
yeah,
picture. A major from 5 Assam was there, right?
five was Major
Holding the
Ghosh.
bars.
Yeah, Major Ghosh was holding the
Major
bars,
Ghosh, right,
and
right, right, right.
Major Ghosh's family is like, that's a shock. That's a shock. What's going on? He's like, he's on Time magazine, and uh, and again, his name was not on the list of POWs that Pakistani said they were holding. So there were all these incidents happening, not connected to my family, but raising a little
I think
alarm
one
by families.
person behind Major Ghosh who looked a lot like Tambe himself, like Lieutenant Tambe, I think it was his wife who first said that this must be him. I mean, Miss Damayanti Tambe.
I did see that. Yes, it's possible.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think she
could
said
be.
it for the first time.
Yeah,
Then, I mean,
yeah,
I think
yeah,
with Major Suri's father starting the entire thing, that we have to do
yeah.
something about them.
So that was probably then the biggest thing that really started this whole search was what happened with Major Suri's father. So the last Pakistani POW that India was holding was released in early 1974. That was after Bangladesh, Pakistan, India, they all came to an agreement. The reason India was still holding these POWs for all this time was because Bangladesh didn't want them released, because Bangladesh wanted India to hand over some almost 190 Pakistani
These are war
officers and
prisoners,
so
I
on.
guess.
Well, that's what Bangladesh said. Hand them over to us. We want to try them for war crimes. And but India was holding them, and then after 2 years, an agreement was made between the three countries. Pakistan, Bangladesh agreed to drop this demand for these war crime trials, and in exchange, Pakistan agreed to recognize Bangladesh as an independent country. And then India's like, okay, since you both have agreed, we will release these Pakistani POWs. All this happened in beginning 1974. About end of 1974, so we're talking about almost like 10 months after India's released all these prisoners, Pakistan's recognized Bangladesh. Mr. R.S. Suri, he's from Faridabad, he got a letter. I think he was working in his garden. I don't know what he was doing. The postman came and there was a letter. And he opened the letter, and in the letter was a slip of paper written in his son's handwriting. And it says, I am okay here. And there was an accompanying little note written by a man. It says, your son is alive in Pakistan, signed by a man named M. Abdul Hamid.
Okay.
So if you look at the date of what happened, it's obvious that Mr. Abdul Hamid, if that's his real name, once he knows what's going on, he says, India has released all Pakistani POWs. We have these Indian POWs, being kept in secret, and he felt that they should be released. There was this Pakistani gentleman who I hold in very high regard. In fact, I dedicated my whole book to this gentleman, because what a brave man he must have been. This Pakistani man who knows he can get into so much trouble for doing this, and yet he did the right thing, because he says he was a morally upright man. So he passed on this letter from Major Suri to his father. But that was that didn't do much, or maybe did, I don't know. But it's just a slip of paper. didn't say much. And Major Suri's father went to the Foreign Ministry of External Affairs, and he says, whoa, 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 something's not right. And look at this. So not much happened, but 6 months later, now I'm talking about June of 1975, he got a postcard written by Major Suri. Earlier, he just got a little slip. This time it's a full postcard. And it had, there were 3 dates. So the card was written over 3 days, and it said Karachi on top. So it was written on Karachi, and it says, he says, I am here. I think it says there, I forget the number, like 20 officers with me or 10 officers, Indian officers with me. Please contact the government of India. And I send my regards. And he wrote it just the way he would write to his father.
Starting with Dear Daddy, I guess.
Dear Daddy, and the way he ended it, and I take your benediction, I touch your feet. This is the way he always wrote to his father. And R.S. Suri is like, he just went on a mission after that. He went to the Ministry of External Affairs, and they were like, well, this could be a hoax, it could be fake. And he's like, here, do a handwriting analysis. I'll give you his letters. And then the Ministry of External Affairs agreed, yeah, okay, fine, we agree. It is the real thing. And they told him, don't talk about this. You can just don't discuss it. Keep it quiet. We'll try and work back channels, and we'll try and do something. And nothing happened for almost 3 years. He would go and he would talk to them, and for 3 years nothing happened. And then in 1978, in Parliament, there was election in India when a new government came to power. I think it's the Janata Dal, I believe, right? They came to power, and somebody asked a question from the new government. Hey, we are hearing these reports of some Indian POWs. So the Minister of State for External Affairs, he did some study, looked at the files, and he announced in Parliament, yes, the Indian intelligence has reasons to believe that. Back then he said 39 Indian soldiers are secretly being kept behind in Pakistan, and came up with a list of names. And on the list, they mentioned Kamal Bakshi, my uncle. And that's, for my family, that was like, what the heck? This is completely out of nowhere. Like, sure, we didn't find his body, we suspected something, but that was it. My grandparents were trying to move on with life, and out of the blue, this comes. So that's how, at least for my family.
Then your family must have been used to the fact that he must have passed away in combat.
That is what happened. After all this happened, and I have my grandfather's diaries and letters, and so I knew his state of mind. And I saw some letters he wrote to people, and the first 2-3 years were extremely hard for him. In fact, soon after the Wagah border exchange, my grandfather resigned from the army. There's a letter he wrote to a friend. My grandfather had this habit of, before writing the final letter, he would write a rough draft. I think that's the way it was done. And then he would write neatly the formal letter. And so he kept the draft. So I know what he was writing. That was really pretty amazing for me. And in the draft, he's writing to a friend saying, I can't discharge my duties as an officer faithfully anymore. My mental state is not right. So he resigned. He was a colonel then, and then they moved. They left wherever they were, and they moved to a place called Maklaskiganj. It's a small little town. It's now in Jharkhand. So he was looking for a place to move to, and another army officer friend of his told him, there is this place. It's a very quaint little place. It used to be an Anglo-Indian commune, started in the 1920s by a bunch of Anglo-Indians. And the leader was a guy named McCluskey, some Scotsman. So it was it's an hour away from Ranchi. They started this town. So, and after independence, a lot of these Anglo-Indians, they started leaving. They started moving to England, Canada, Australia, whatever, and selling their houses. And some Indians started moving. And so my grandparents moved there to Muflaskiganj, and a fascinating place. I know I spent all my summer vacations there. Great community, and they restarted their life. It's a very rural setting. There weren't any roads or telephone, electricity there when I used to go there when I was growing up. So they really had to fend for yourself and develop your life. And my grandparents, they used to support the local villagers, with medicine and taking care of them. And they reestablished their life. And by 1977, 78, they've sort of gotten used to the idea that their son's no more in their lives, and then this bombshell gets dropped on them that
might be alive.
This is 7 years after the war, about 4 years after all the POWs have been gaming. This might be alive. So then starts the whole just roller coaster of emotions for my family. You think you've settled something, and then the hope rises, and then by then
I think
so
people
78
had hopes because many soldiers who were captured by the Chinese in 1962 war, many of them came back after a long time, and people felt that this might also happen now.
That's right. And then so when this happened, when this announcement was made in Parliament, that's when Mr. R.S. Suri, he decided to go public with this letter he had got from his son, because before that he was keeping quiet, because the Ministry of External Affairs was saying no, let's stop, keep it quiet. So once this news came out, he went public, and he says, well, look what I have, look at the proof I have. And he reached out to all the families on the list of names that came in the Parliament, including Mr. Suri wrote to my grandfather, and he wrote to everybody else and the other family, and he invited them all to Faridabad. So everybody, when they met, got together, and then they made this organization, the MDPRA, Missing Defense Personals Organization, Relatives Association, and so I have correspondence from Mr. Suri to my grandfather, strategizing, and says, let's how to go public. To reach out to all their respective members of parliaments. So my father wrote to his MP in Ranchi, and a lot of letter writing, a lot of things, but nothing happened. Everything they tried, and but that was not all for my family. This was 1978, and then again they're trying to go through all this campaign of trying to get them back. And then in 1988, an Indian civilian prisoner was released. So India and Pakistan, they were periodically released their civilian prisoners. I don't know, they could be, sometimes people would cross the border by mistake, sometimes fishermen would get caught, sometimes there were smugglers, whatever, I don't know. So in 1988, there was an exchange like this, and a man named Mukhtar Singh crossed over from Wagah border, and the Indians debriefed him, and he says, I was in Multan jail, and I saw Captain Bakshi there. And this is he named him. In fact, he even said he saw Captain Kaura, Ravinder Kaura. Not only that, Ravinder Kaura even told him where his parents lived. So Mukhtar Singh wrote to Captain Kaura's parents, and Captain Kaura's father met him also, and they even talked about him. So he actually named Kamal Bakshi too, my uncle. He says he was there in Multan. I think now he might be in
Multan jail.
In Multan jail, that is a city in Pakistan. And then he says, I think he might have been transferred to Bahawalpur or Lahore or something. So that was in 1988. So for my family, it's these things that keep, just when things happen, and then you try and get used to something, and something else happens. You get used to it, and something else happens, and then it's been this.
I I can't even imagine.
The anxiety, the helplessness that you can't, you want to do something, and the helplessness and the anguish and the so that's how it went for my grandparents, unfortunately. And
So
and the
did
last
Pakistan
incident.
ever allow family members of, I mean, the captured, I mean, or anybody, I mean, the 71 war POWs suspected in Pakistan to visit Pakistan anytime, Pakistani jails?
You mean the families?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
family
the Indian
members.
families. Yeah, so in '83 was the first time after Mr. Suri was probably, really ahead of this team, and he has all these letters from Prime Minister Indira Gandhi and from Narasimha Rao and from there's a whole collection of letters which those of us in the family we have seen them, and so he was really pushing for this, and even the Prime Minister was trying to set up something. So in 1983, there was the first time after the war, the Indians were allowed to go and see uh, uh, civilian prisoners. It was for civilian prisoners, and the Indian government says, "Okay, Mr. Suri, why don't you also go and you can go visit the jail in '83." So Mr. Suri and two, three other family members went and visited this jail, and I believe it was in '83. And but of course they weren't allowed to talk to anybody. They were just prisoners there, and they would just see them. They weren't allowed to talk to anybody. And then so that was in '83. And then again, when more information started coming out over the next 2 decades, again people were petitioning again and again. And by then Musharraf was the president of Pakistan, and then Musharraf. This was in early 2000s. He says, "Okay, come and look at all these jails, you can go and visit." So this time a bigger contingent of Indian family members went, and they were not allowed to talk to any prisoner, but they were shown whatever the jailers wanted them to see, and it was a bit of a show. I guess the families got to go around from the Pakistani side. They could say, "Look, we let you visit our jails," but it was, I think it was a big, a bit of a show done here. Photographers are here, and you can document it, see like everything. So all this goes on, and the family is still petitioning, but we have all this information, do something. But the Pakistani response was, they don't exist. These all these reports you're getting, these are not real. They can't be trusted. The people who are telling you their life, they are like smugglers or spies. And how can this is not true. So this went on into 2010, 2011. But in 2011 or 2012, the most amazing, seemingly impossible event happened. A Sikh carpenter, Sukhdev Singh, got a job to go to Oman to do some carpentry work. In the Middle East, most of the labor is from India, right? So he got this contract to go to Oman, and it just so happened that he was sent to this island off the main coast of Oman called Masira Island, Omani Island, and he to do some carpentry. It was a government-owned building. Sukhdev wasn't sure if it's a prison or it's a government office, but there were guards all over, and he would go there every day I think he was working in the kitchen doing some cabinet work. And he said there was an old man who would come to the kitchen to make tea, dressed up. He's with the Muslims, skull cap the way they wear and with bearded. And he thought, "Oh, this man comes, makes tea, goes." After a couple of times of seeing him, this man passed by again, and when there was no one listening, who Sukhdev Singh thought was an Omani man, this man started talking to Sukhdev in pure Punjabi. And Sukhdev is just shocked, first of all, that who's this Omani man talking to me in pure Punjabi with just the way I talked back in village. And this man says, "Oh, actually, I'm Sikh. I was in 15 Punjab battalion in the
Oh, really?
71 war in the Hosseiniwala, in the battle in Hosseiniwala. That's
Right,
where he
right, right.
was. He said, I was captured in Hosseiniwala. I was in Pakistan for a few years. Then they put me on a boat. There were at least 5 other of us Indians shipped to Oman, and I'm in a prison, and my prison cell mate is from Ludhiana. So it wasn't just him. He says the man who shares my prison, even he's from the Ludhiana district, and they were the other people from my boat. After we came to, I haven't seen them. They were sent to other prisons. This was in 2012. This is just a dozen years ago. And so all this time, the families have been saying, telling the Indian government to tell the Pakistani government. Pakistani government said, no, 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 no. They don't exist. So now the family's like, okay, what could be better? They find an Indian, he's not even in Pakistan. Now it's the Omanis, and India and Oman have great relationships, at least. That's what they tell us. They have a great relationship. And so the families are like, great, for sure, the Indian government has everything they need. They have the men, we have the proof, go get them back. What did the Indian government do? Nothing. The Indian government did not even go and interview that carpenter. They did not even go and ask him, show us on the map where he was. The Indian carpenter, Sukhdev Singh, said, he's in this building next to the Shell gas station. Because every day Sukhdev would go to the Shell gas station, and from there someone would accompany him into this place. And there's only one Shell gas station on Masira Island. You can Google that. So you can actually go and see one of the buildings they were possibly in. The Indian government did nothing. And that's where we're at. It is such a shame how everything has transpired. Yeah.
Such a shame. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, like, why did the Indian government didn't do anything? Like, yeah.
Yeah. In 2018, now this happened in 2012 when this thing came about. So what happened was Sukhdev Singh, after he finished his contract in Oman, he was there. It was a year contract, so he finished it. After this incident, he was there for almost a year, and then he came back to India, and then he went to the village where this Indian soldier told him he was from. Went to the village, found his family, found that soldier's wife. Told her, she showed in this photograph. She says, yeah, that's the man. Of course, he's much older now. And all this came out in the news in 2012. And nothing from the Indian government. And then in 2018, there's an Indian newspaper called I believe it's called The Guardian, the Sunday Guardian, and they filed an RTI, request to information from the Ministry of External Affairs, asking them, give us some information, what happened to this case. And only because it was an RTI, and by law, you're supposed to respond to an RTI. So the Ministry of External Affairs says, yeah, the Omanis say there's no Indian there. That's it. That was the end of the story. They say there's no Indian there, whatever. And like, is that all you care about? Are you just and for them, that's the end of story for the Ministry of External Affairs. Who knows what the reasons were behind why? But yes, it's a shame. It's unbelievable, and as we families of the POWs, it's inexcusable, frankly. Yeah.
And it's an inhuman tragedy inflicted upon families.
Absolutely.
Yeah, like even if a person is dead and a family knows, it's like, okay, it will take time to make peace with it. But this,
yeah, you're so at least when you're a soldier, your family knows at the back of the mind they might lose you. You're going to war. So, and then you get the news. Of course, it breaks your heart and you're sad. But there's some closure because you, after all, they were soldiers, and then you move on. But this is cruelty. This is inhumane to do this. This is not even. This goes beyond any rule of warfare or engagement. This is just morally wrong. So yeah, going back to, like I said, the book was dedicated to Mr. Hamid, and then of course I'm not against all Pakistanis. I'm sure there are some amazing people in Pakistan like Mr. Hamid, such an amazing, brave, morally right man who wanted to do the right thing. I can even narrow it down to who did this. December 16th, the war got over. January 9th is when the list of POWs was given to the Red Cross. Whoever was in charge in Pakistan for those 3 weeks between December 16, 1971 and January 1972, they're the ones who did this. They're the ones who made this decision, whoever was in charge during that time. And that's where we stand now.
Okay, another thing, like, you must have received some help regarding finding any information on your uncle from the Pakistani side. Could you talk a bit about that?
Yeah. Well, not help on finding them. Like I said, I communicated them, and I want to learn more about the war. All the people I talked to, they were just captains or lieutenants back then. So, the people who made these decisions were
Higher ups.
Higher ups. So these guys had nothing to do with the POWs. So they just told me about the war. And friends of my uncle from boarding school, they reached out to Pakistani officers and government officials. They wrote to them. Some of them are settled in Australia now. A man named Brian McMahon, he wrote, he communicated a lot with senior Pakistani personnel, and but of course, it didn't go anywhere. They're like, yeah, it didn't really go anywhere. So from his family, we had my aunt, my mother's younger sister. She lives in the UK. She brought up the case in the UK Parliament. They even mentioned my uncle's name in the UK Parliament, and because a question was raised, from her constituency, she asked her MP, and the MP raised the question. But of course, the response was, well, this is not something we can do. It's between the Indians and Pakistanis. We did a bit of a campaign. My uncle's classmates from Sherwood, who've been amazing. One of them joined the U.S. Navy, and he did a petition in Washington, D.C., and then another person, he wrote to the human rights judge in Australia, and presented the case. So anyway, it didn't go nowhere. So a lot of petitioning from our sides. Yeah.
I think nobody left a stone unturned yet. Nothing materialized.
Yeah, and that's in my family. I mean, there've been so many people active from other POW families who've been trying so hard, and well, it's one of those things, right? You don't know why some things like this happen, but they happen to such amazing men. They were all such amazing men. Who signs up to join the army and go to war? It's the country's best, the best and the finest the country has to offer, and the least we can offer them is to at least
have a closure,
to
at
have
least.
some closure and do something for them. Look what they did for us. Look what they did for the country. And look how we do nothing for them. That's inexcusable.
Okay. Um, your mother, I think she has also been a bit vocal about Captain Bakshi's case. How has she been dealing with it? I mean, yeah, she is the sister of Captain Bakshi. Um,
Yeah. So both my mother and my aunt have been pretty active. My mother, yeah, she's been trying to reach out to people at her end, uh, and my aunt, like I said, in England, she's been petitioned a lot of people. But yeah, it takes a toll on you. You know, uh, you try, and goes nowhere. So at some point, it's just hard. How long can you keep going on? So I think that's where I sort of stepped in. You know, I said, okay, let's pass the baton to me. You know, let's we can't let this thing be forgotten so easily. So we're doing it together as a family.
right. And could you talk a bit about your book so that people get to know a bit more, like about Captain Bakshi and his contributions and whatever happened to him, the tragedy after that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The book's a lot more than just about the POWs and what happened to him. And I think if someone looks at the book cover, it's got this battle scene and what happens to him. But I want my readers to know that the book is actually not just that. In fact, it's a story of quite a remarkable young man. And I say that not because I'm biased, not because he's my uncle, but everybody I talked to who've known him since he was a little child have told me what a character he was. Like he was how driven and how uh, generous and how he would focused he was. And I have stories of him since age, well, since as far as I can collect, from 7 year old, and what he did in boarding school as a little boy, and what he, things that was said. I want to share a story with you and your listeners. You know, he was he must have been 11, 12 years old, and they were being taught history. Okay, this is in school, and the history book was written by an Englishman, and it was about how the English conquered India. So in that, and according to that book, all the English victories against the Indians were as a result of these brilliant military strategies and how well planned out, well fought wars the British were. And all the Indian victories, when the Indians won, the book said that they were just like chaotic battles, like bloody affairs and just chaos. And, it was just unplanned. It was just how the Indians won. And so they are all these students in class, 12-year-olds, 13-year-old, they are learning this. And everyone in class was like, wait a minute, this is not right. This is not the right portrayal of history. That's not what happened. We know that's not what happened. But out of everybody in class, only Kamal stood up and told the teacher that. And I heard the story from his classmate. Now, after 70 years or 65 years, whatever, his classmate, all the stories they were sharing about him, this was one of the stories they told me. They still remembered after 65 years, they still remember the story. That is, Kamal stood up in class and told the teacher, "Sir, this is not right. First of all, it's not true and it's not right." And all the students. So ever since that age, students could tell the kind of character he was. He like his sense of right and wrong. So I want listeners of this program to know that the book is the story of this young, earnest, very driven, morally correct, obviously very brave boy who grew up into the man that he did. So I want to share that story. In fact, that's why I wrote the book. I want them to know what kind of person he was, and how someone like that becomes a soldier.
Standing up against a teacher and saying that it's not right, that takes a lot of courage.
That alone tells you who the type of people who sign up for the army and who want to
make a stand against a battalion and a squadron of tanks. Yeah.
Who and what they do when finally, when they know that this is it. Things are not going to go well for them. What do they do? What decisions they take? I let the readers read the book and find out for themselves what he did, his last actions. And he was with the Havaldar Ajit Singh, who was with him right till the very end. And Havaldar Ajit Singh saw what happened at the very end, and that's all in the book. Yeah. So you asked what about the book. I want people to know that it's more than just a war story and POW. It's about the life of a boy who became the type of man that he did. That's what the book is about.
Right. I hope people get to read and know more about him and more about people like him, and the story gets out to more people. Yeah.
Yes, and
at least you and your family should get some closure. I don't know, like that's what I personally think. I think what thousands of Indians think all around the world. Yeah. At least
thank you so much.
We can do for them. That's the least.
Thank you, and I really appreciate your wanting to discuss this book with me and spread the word.
Yeah, that's the least I can do from my side.
I really appreciate that. Thank you, Devan.
Thank you so much for being here, sir. Thank you so much. And again, thank you not only to you, but to your uncle and men like him.
I appreciate that.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Talk to you again.
All right. Likewise. Okay. Bye-bye.